The coffee mug shattered against the wall 6 inches from her head. Elena Cross didn't flinch. She'd learned years ago that flinching only made it worse. Around them, the diner went silent. Forks stopped midair. Conversations died. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath. Marcus stood over her, his face twisted with rage, his hand still raised from the throw. "You think you can embarrass me?" he hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you're better than me because of your family's money?" Elena kept her eyes down, her hands folded in her lap, her entire body compressed into the smallest possible target. This was survival. This was Tuesday. Then a quiet voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "That's enough. If you're watching this, I need you to do something for me. This story gets bigger than you think, and I want to know how far it travels. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from, and if this story moves you, hit that like button." Now let me tell you about the night Lucas Reed stopped being invisible and started changing everything. Lucas Reed had been trying to eat his dinner in peace. At 36 years old, peace was something he'd learned to value above almost everything else. It was rare, fragile, and usually interrupted, much like tonight. He sat in the corner booth of Rosie's diner with his daughter Mia, who was 8 years old and currently attempting to build a structural masterpiece out of French fries and ketchup. "Dad, look," she said, her tongue poking out in concentration. "It's the Eiffel Tower." Lucas smiled despite his exhaustion. "That's the Leaning Tower of Pisa, sweetheart." "No, it's the Eiffel Tower because I say it is." He couldn't argue with that logic. Mia had inherited his dark hair and stubborn streak, but her eyes, those bright, curious eyes, were all her mother's. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, taken by an illness that moved faster than any of them could process. And some days the weight of raising Mia alone felt like trying to hold up the sky with his bare hands. But he did it. Every single day, he did it. "Eat your actual food," he said gently, pushing her plate closer. "Architectural genius requires fuel." Mia giggled and popped a fry into her mouth. Around them, Rosie's diner hummed with its usual weeknight rhythm. The place was a time capsule from 1985. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, a jukebox that only played songs from before Mia was born. Lucas loved it precisely because nothing ever changed here. In a life that had been torn apart and poorly reassembled, predictability was a gift. That's when the shouting started. Lucas looked up to see a couple 3 booths away. The woman was in her early 30s, blonde, wearing clothes that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. The man was older, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of tan that came from country clubs and the kind of watch that came from knowing the right people. Lucas had seen men like him before, polished, confident, and utterly convinced the world existed to serve them. "Don't you dare walk away from me," the man was saying, his voice rising. "We're not done talking about this." The woman, Elena, though Lucas didn't know her name yet, kept her voice low. "Marcus, please. Not here." "Not here?" Marcus laughed, sharp and cruel. "You mean not in front of the peasants? Is that it? You ashamed of me now?" Several diners turned to look. Lucas saw old Mr. Chen pause with his soup spoon halfway to his mouth. He saw Rosie herself peek out from the kitchen, her face creased with concern, and he saw his daughter's eyes go wide. "Daddy, why is that man yelling?" "I don't know, baby. Just eat your dinner." But even as he said it, Lucas felt something tightening in his chest. He'd spent most of his life as a mechanic, a single father, a man who kept his head down and his hands busy. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't anyone special. He was just trying to get through each day with his daughter fed, clothed, and happy. But there were some things you couldn't ignore. Marcus grabbed Elena's wrist. She winced, tried to pull away. He held tighter. "Let go," she said, her voice barely audible. "Make me." That's when the coffee mug flew. Marcus had grabbed it from the table and hurled it at the wall beside Elena's head. The ceramic exploded into a dozen pieces, coffee spraying across the booth, across Elena's pale blue dress, across the careful composure she'd been desperately maintaining. The diner went dead silent. Lucas was moving before he consciously decided to move. He stood from his booth, his 6'2" frame unfolding with the kind of deliberate calm that came from years of working with his hands, years of understanding that real strength didn't need to announce itself. He crossed the diner in 5 long strides, aware that every eye was now on him, aware that Mia was watching, aware that he was about to do something that couldn't be undone. He stopped beside their booth. "I think the lady asked you to let go," Lucas said quietly. Marcus turned, his face flushed with anger and expensive whiskey. Up close, Lucas could see the broken capillaries in his nose, the slight tremor in his hands, the way his pupils had contracted to pinpoints. This wasn't just rage. This was chemical courage, the kind that made men feel invincible right up until they weren't. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus demanded. "Nobody," Lucas said. And it was true. He was nobody. Just a mechanic from a small town wearing jeans with oil stains that never quite washed out and a t-shirt he'd owned since before Mia was born. "But I'm asking you nicely. Let her go." Marcus looked him up and down with visible disdain. "This is a private conversation. Why don't you go back to your trailer park and mind your own business?" Lucas didn't react to the insult. He'd heard worse. Instead, he kept his eyes on Marcus's hand, still wrapped around Elena's wrist, his fingers pressing hard enough to leave marks. "Last time," Lucas said, his voice even quieter now. "Let go." For a moment, Marcus seemed to calculate his options. He had money, status, probably lawyers on retainer and connections that could make problems disappear. Lucas had calloused hands and a daughter watching from across the room. On paper, there was no contest. But paper didn't account for everything. Marcus released Elena's wrist and stood, getting in Lucas's face. He was shorter by several inches, but that only seemed to make him angrier. "You want to be a hero? Fine. Let's see how that works out for you." Lucas didn't move, didn't raise his hands, didn't change his expression. "I'm not trying to be a hero," he said. "I'm just trying to have dinner with my daughter without watching someone get hurt. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. She's going to stay. And we're all going to finish our meals in peace. And if I don't?" Lucas let the silence stretch for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, he thought about Sarah, who had taught him that standing up for what's right isn't always loud or dramatic. He thought about Mia, who was learning every day what kind of man her father was. And he thought about the woman in the booth, trembling and trying so hard not to cry. "Then you'll make a choice you'll regret," Lucas said simply. "Your call." Something in his voice must have gotten through because Marcus took a step back. His face was still twisted with anger, but beneath it, Lucas could see something else now. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. "This isn't over," Marcus spat. He jabbed a finger at Elena. "You're going to regret this." Then he turned and stormed out, slamming the diner door so hard the bell above it fell off and clattered to the floor. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas turned to Elena, who was still sitting in the booth, her arms wrapped around herself, her entire body shaking. Up close, he could see the red marks on her wrist, the coffee stains on her dress, the careful makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, and for a moment she seemed unable to speak. Then she nodded, just barely. "Do you need me to call someone? Police? A friend?" She shook her head quickly. "No, no police, please." Lucas understood that response better than he wanted to. Sometimes the systems designed to protect people only made things worse. Sometimes the scariest thing wasn't the danger itself, but the exposure that came with asking for help. "Okay," he said. "No police. But you shouldn't be alone right now. Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Elena opened her mouth, closed it again. The truth was written all over her face. She didn't. Or if she did, she couldn't reach it. Not tonight, maybe not ever. Lucas glanced back at Mia, who was watching with those big, serious eyes. Then he looked at Rosie, who had emerged from the kitchen and was already heading over with a pot of coffee, and that particular expression she wore when she'd decided to take charge of a situation. "Honey," Rosie said to Elena, her voice gentle but firm, "you're going to sit right here and have some coffee. You're going to take a minute to breathe, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. Sound good?" Elena nodded, tears finally spilling over. Lucas caught Rosie's eye and mouthed a silent thank you. Rosie waved him off. This was what people did, her gesture said. This was what community meant. He returned to his booth, where Mia had abandoned her Eiffel Tower and was staring at him with an expression He couldn't quite read. Is she going to be okay? Mia asked quietly. I think so, Lucas said, though he wasn't entirely sure. Sometimes people need help, and when they do, we help them, even if we don't know them. Because it's the right thing to do? Exactly. Mia considered this, then nodded seriously. Mom would have done the same thing. Lucas felt his throat tighten. Yeah, baby, she would have. They finished their dinner in relative quiet, though Lucas kept glancing over at Elena. Rosie had indeed taken charge, sitting with her, talking to her in low tones, occasionally refilling her coffee cup. A few other regulars had gathered around too. Mrs. Patterson, who taught second grade and had a gift for making people feel safe, and Big Mike, who owned the hardware store and had the kind of presence that discouraged any further trouble. By the time Lucas paid his bill and bundled Mia into her jacket, Elena had stopped crying. She was talking now, her voice too low for him to hear, but her posture had relaxed slightly. The immediate crisis had passed. Lucas was halfway to the door when he heard her call out. Wait. He turned. Elena had stood up from the booth and was walking toward him. Up close, even with her makeup ruined and her dress stained, there was something striking about her. Not just beautiful, though she was, but something else. A quality he couldn't name. Like looking at someone who'd been carved from marble and was only now learning she could move. I didn't get to thank you, she said. No thanks necessary, Lucas replied. Really? Yes, she insisted. It is. What you did. Most people wouldn't have. They would have looked away, pretended not to see. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. He'd never been good at accepting gratitude. I just did what anyone should do. But they don't. Her voice cracked slightly. They don't. There was a weight behind those words, a history he didn't know and didn't need to know. Lucas glanced down at Mia, who was watching this exchange with her usual intense curiosity. Listen, he said carefully. I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad you've got people here looking out for you tonight. He gestured to Rosie and the others. But beyond that, you don't owe me anything, all right? Elena studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if trying to decode something. Then she nodded slowly. All right, she said, but if you ever need anything, I won't, Lucas said, more firmly than he intended. Then softer, but I appreciate the thought. He guided Mia out into the parking lot, where his truck sat under the flickering streetlight. A 2004 Ford F-150 with rust on the wheel wells and a radio that only worked on Wednesdays. It wasn't much, but it was his, paid for in full, and it got them where they needed to go. As he buckled Mia into her booster seat, she said, Dad? Yeah, sweetheart? You were really brave in there. Lucas paused, his hand on the seatbelt. I wasn't brave. I was just present. What's the difference? He thought about that as he walked around to the driver's side. What was the difference? Brave people charged into burning buildings and pulled people from wreckage. Brave people made grand gestures and changed the world with their actions. Lucas had just stood up in a diner and asked a man to leave. That wasn't brave. That was baseline human decency. But as he started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot, he thought about the way Elena had looked at him. Like he'd done something extraordinary. Like he'd been a hero. He wasn't. He knew he wasn't. But maybe, just maybe, the world had gotten so dark that ordinary kindness looked like heroism from the right angle. The next morning, Lucas woke at 5:30, same as always. His alarm didn't go off because he never needed it. His body had learned the rhythm years ago. Up before dawn, shower, coffee, wake Mia, breakfast, pack her lunch, drop her at school, open the garage by 7. His garage, Reed's Auto Repair, sat on the eastern edge of town, wedged between a laundromat that had closed 2 years ago and a vacant lot where a grocery store used to be. It wasn't much to look at from the outside. A cinder block building with a fading sign and a parking lot that desperately needed repaving. But inside it was clean, organized, and equipped with tools Lucas had been collecting since he was 16 years old. He'd inherited the business from his father, who'd inherited it from his father, which made Lucas the third generation of Reeds to spend their days covered in grease and arguing with stubborn engine blocks. Most days he loved it. Some days it felt like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. Today started as one of the latter. His first customer was Mrs. Henderson, whose ancient Buick had developed a mysterious rattle that only occurred on Thursdays between 2 and 4 p.m. His second was Tommy Zhao, a college kid whose Honda needed an oil change he couldn't afford but desperately needed. Lucas did it anyway and charged him half price. Tommy would pay him back when he could. He always did. By noon, Lucas had diagnosed 2 transmission problems, replaced a serpentine belt, and talked Mr. Kowalski out of buying a new car when all he really needed was a new battery and some faith in American engineering. He was under a Chevy Silverado, wrestling with a particularly stubborn oil filter when he heard the bell above the garage door chime. "Be right with you," he called out, giving the filter one last twist. It came free with a satisfying crack, and oil immediately began draining into the pan he'd positioned beneath it. "Take your time," a woman's voice replied. Something about that voice made Lucas pause. He knew that voice. He'd heard it last night, shaking and frightened in a diner booth. He rolled out from under the truck to find Elena Cross standing in his garage. She looked different in daylight. The expensive dress had been replaced by jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. If Lucas had passed her on the street, he might not have recognized her, but those eyes, exhausted, haunted, but trying so hard to be strong, those were unmistakable. "Hi," she said. Lucas stood, wiping his hands on a rag that only made them dirtier. "Hi. You doing okay?" "Better than last night." She managed a small smile. "Thanks to you." "I told you that wasn't—" "I know what you told me." Elena took a step forward, looking around the garage with genuine interest. "Is this your place?" For better or worse, Lucas gestured vaguely at the organized chaos around them. 3 generations of Reeds have kept this town's cars running. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. "Honest work," Elena repeated like she was tasting the words. "That's rare." There was something in her tone that made Lucas look at her more carefully. Up close, in the bright fluorescent lights of his garage, he could see details he'd missed last night. The faint bruises on her wrist where Marcus had grabbed her. The tension in her shoulders like she was braced for impact even now. The way she kept glancing at the door, as if expecting someone to burst through it. "How did you find me?" he asked, not accusing, just curious. "Small town," Elena said with a shrug. "I asked at the diner. Rosie told me you ran the auto shop. She also told me you're a good man who minds his own business and doesn't like fuss." Paused. Was she right? Generally speaking, yes. "Then I'll keep this brief." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this, as a thank you." Lucas looked at the envelope like it might bite him. "I told you last night, you don't owe me anything." "I know, but I'm giving it anyway." She set the envelope on his workbench. "Please, it would mean a lot to me. I can't accept money for doing the right thing." "It's not money." Elena's smile turned sad. "Well, not just money. It's complicated. But please, just take it. Look at it when you have time. And if you decide you don't want it, you can tell me yourself. Deal?" Lucas wanted to argue, but there was something in her expression that stopped him. A quiet desperation, like this mattered more than he understood. "Deal," he said finally. Elena's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you." They stood there for a moment in awkward silence, the garage filled with the sounds of dripping oil and distant traffic, and the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Sure. Why did you help me?" "Really?" Lucas thought about that. He could have given her the easy answer, because it was right, because someone needed to, because he had a daughter and wanted her to see that people help each other. All of those things were true. But there was something else, something he hadn't quite articulated even to himself. "A few years ago," he said slowly, "my wife got sick, cancer. It moved fast. One day she was fine, the next day she wasn't, and 6 months later she was gone." He paused, the words still hard even after all this time. "During those months, people helped us. Neighbors brought food, friends watched Mia. The community showed up over and over, even though there was nothing they could really do to change what was happening. Elena's eyes had softened. I learned something during that time, Lucas continued. I learned that kindness doesn't fix everything. It didn't save Sarah, but it mattered anyway. It made the unbearable slightly more bearable. So now, when I see someone who needs help, I help them. Not because I think I can fix everything, but because I remember what it felt like to be drowning and have someone throw you a rope, even if that rope couldn't pull you all the way to shore. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Your wife was lucky to have you. I was lucky to have her. And your daughter, Mia, right? She's lucky too. Lucas smiled despite himself. She's everything. Elena nodded, understanding. Then she glanced at her watch and took a step back toward the door. I should go, but thank you, Lucas, for last night, for today, for reminding me that good people still exist. They exist, Lucas said. You just have to look for them. And sometimes you have to be one. After she left, Lucas returned to the Silverado, but his mind was elsewhere. The envelope sat on his workbench like a ticking clock, demanding attention he wasn't ready to give. He finished the oil change, rotated the tires, checked the brake pads, did everything he could think of to avoid looking at that envelope. But eventually, his curiosity won. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery, the kind with weight and texture that probably cost more per sheet than his entire notepad. The handwriting was elegant, practiced, the script of someone who'd been taught penmanship as a child. Lucas, I've spent the last 3 years of my life feeling invisible, trapped in a relationship where my voice didn't matter, my choices weren't my own, and my worth was measured solely by my family's name and money. Last night, for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone saw me. Not my bank account, not my connections, just me, a person who needed help. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask what I could give you. You just helped. And then you walked away, expecting nothing. I can't walk away. Not from this, not from you. What you did mattered more than you know, and I need you to understand that. Inside this envelope, you'll find information for a bank transfer. Before you refuse, and I know you want to, please hear me out. This isn't charity. This isn't payment for what you did. This is me choosing, for the first time in years, to do something meaningful with resources I never asked for but have always had. Your garage is struggling. I can see it in the cracked pavement outside, the peeling paint, the way you charged that college kid half price because you knew he needed the help. You're a good person, trying to keep a good business alive in a town that's slowly dying. Let me help. Not because you owe me, not because I'm trying to buy your friendship or assuage my guilt, but because sometimes the right thing to do is accept help when it's offered freely, with no strings attached. The choice is yours. But please know that saying yes isn't taking advantage. It's giving me the chance to do something good with all this money that's never made me happy anyway. With gratitude and respect, Elena Cross. Lucas read the note 3 times. Then he looked at the bank information. Then he sat down on his rolling stool and put his head in his hands. The amount was obscene, not enough to make him wealthy, but enough to fix every problem his garage had, and then some. New equipment, proper repairs to the building, maybe even hiring some help so he didn't have to work 60-hour weeks just to break even. It was everything he needed, and it terrified him. Because accepting money changed things. It created obligations, debts, expectations. Even if Elena said there were no strings attached, strings had a way of appearing. They always did. But as he sat there in his garage, surrounded by tools passed down through generations and cars belonging to people he'd known his whole life, Lucas thought about what Elena had written. Sometimes the right thing to do is accept help when it's offered freely. His whole life, he'd been the helper. The person who showed up, did the work, expected nothing in return. Being on the receiving end felt wrong, uncomfortable, like wearing someone else's shoes. But maybe that was pride talking. Maybe there was just as much courage in accepting help as in offering it. He thought about Mia, about the college fund that was looking thinner every month. He thought about the leak in the garage roof he'd been patching with duct tape and prayers. He thought about Mrs. Henderson and Tommy Zhao and all the other people who needed affordable, honest car repair in a world that seemed designed to squeeze every last dollar from people who had none to spare. If he accepted this money, he could do more, help more, be more. If he refused it, he'd be helping no one, least of all himself. Lucas picked up his phone. Elena had included her number at the bottom of the note. His thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment before he finally typed out a message. "Can we talk?" The response came 30 seconds later. "Yes. When and where?" Lucas looked around his garage, his kingdom of grease and determination and barely holding on. "Tomorrow night. Rosie's Diner, 7 p.m. I'll be there." Lucas set down his phone and returned to work, but something had shifted. The day felt different now, heavier with possibility and fear in equal measure. He didn't know it yet, but that envelope, that conversation, that moment of accepting help instead of refusing it, that was the moment everything began to change. Not just for him, for everyone. Lucas arrived at Rosie's Diner 15 minutes early, which gave him just enough time to second-guess every decision he'd made in the last 24 hours. He'd left Mia with Mrs. Patterson next door, telling her he had a business meeting, but feeling like a liar anyway. This wasn't business. This was something else entirely, something he didn't have words for yet. The diner looked exactly as it had 2 nights ago, which was both comforting and unsettling. Same red vinyl booths, same checkerboard floor, same jukebox playing Patsy Cline like the world hadn't moved on from 1962. But the booth where Elena had sat trembling, where Marcus had thrown that coffee mug, seemed different now. Haunted, maybe. Or just heavy with memory. Lucas slid into a corner booth and ordered coffee from Rosie, who gave him a look that said she knew exactly why he was here and had opinions about it. "She seems like good people," Rosie said, pouring his coffee with the steady hand of someone who'd been doing this for 40 years. "Scared, but good." "You talked to her?" "She came back yesterday morning. Helped me prep for the lunch rush, wouldn't take no for an answer. Said she needed to keep her hands busy." Rosie set down the pot and fixed Lucas with a meaningful stare. "Girl's running from something, or someone. You be careful, Lucas Reed. Kindness is good, but kindness that gets you hurt isn't kindness at all." "I'm just having coffee with her, Rosie." "Uh-huh, that's what they all say." But she smiled as she walked away, and Lucas knew that despite her warnings, Rosie approved. She'd always been able to read people. Could tell within 30 seconds of meeting someone whether they were worth her time or not. If she thought Elena was good people, that meant something. Elena walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. She wore jeans again and a dark green sweater that looked soft and expensive without being ostentatious. Her hair was down this time, falling in waves around her shoulders, and she'd put on just enough makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes. She spotted Lucas immediately and crossed the diner with the kind of grace that spoke to years of etiquette lessons and charity galas, but her eyes held the wariness of someone who'd learned to expect the worst. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Hi." Rosie appeared with another coffee cup and the pot, filling Elena's cup without asking. "You two need menus, or you know what you want?" "Just coffee for now," Elena said. "Thank you, Rosie." Rosie's eyebrows went up slightly at being called by name, but she nodded and disappeared again, leaving them alone in their corner of the universe. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lucas watched Elena add cream to her coffee, noticed the way her hands shook slightly, noticed the fresh bruises on her wrist that makeup couldn't quite hide. He thought about Marcus, about rage and control, and the kind of violence that left marks invisible to everyone but those who knew how to look. "I read your note," Lucas said finally. "And? And I checked my bank account this morning?" Elena's expression didn't change, but something in her posture tightened. "I wanted to make sure you understood I was serious. $50,000 is pretty serious." "It's a drop in the bucket, Lucas. Trust me." He believed her. He'd grown up in this town where $50,000 was a life-changing amount of money, where people worked their entire lives and never saw that kind of sum all at once. But looking at Elena, at the casual way she said it, he understood that she lived in a different world, one where money flowed like water and 50,000 was pocket change. "I can't accept it," he said. Elena's face fell. "Why not?" "Because I don't know you, Because accepting that kind of money from a stranger doesn't feel right. Because he stopped searching for the right words. Because it changes things, creates obligations. I helped you because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted something in return. I know that, Elena said, her voice urgent now. Lucas, that's exactly why I want to do this. Because you didn't ask for anything, because you stood up when no one else would, and then you walked away like it was nothing. It was nothing. It wasn't. Her voice rose slightly, and a few diners glanced over. Elena took a breath, lowered her volume. It wasn't nothing to me. Do you have any idea how long I've been invisible? How many people have watched Marcus treat me like property and said nothing, did nothing, because he has money and connections, and I'm just supposed to smile and be grateful? Lucas kept quiet. Let her talk. This wasn't about the money anymore. Maybe it never had been. I've spent 3 years trapped, Elena continued, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was the only solid thing in the world. 3 years in a relationship that started as a business arrangement and turned into a prison. My father runs Cross Industries, maybe you've heard of it. Tech manufacturing, commercial real estate, investments across 6 continents. When he got sick 2 years ago, he started grooming me to take over. But he's old-fashioned, traditional. He didn't think I could run the company alone, so he arranged for me to marry Marcus. Merge our families, strengthen the business, secure the legacy. Arranged, Lucas repeated. Like this is the 18th century? Like this is big business where marriages are transactions and people are assets. Elena's laugh was bitter. I said yes because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just played the part, did what was expected, everything would work out. And for a while it did. Marcus was charming when he wanted to be. Attentive, he said all the right things. What changed? My father got better. The treatment worked, he went into remission, and suddenly I wasn't the heir apparent anymore. I was just the girlfriend, the accessory, the woman who was supposed to smile and look pretty and not ask questions. She stared into her coffee. That's when Marcus started showing who he really was. When he stopped pretending to see me as an equal and started treating me like property he'd already purchased. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest, hot and righteous. He thought about Mia, about raising her in a world where men like Marcus existed, where women like Elena had to smile through their own erasure. Why didn't you leave, he asked, then immediately regretted it. He knew that question. Everyone knew that question. It was the wrong question, the question that put blame on the victim instead of the abuser, but Elena didn't take offense. Because leaving isn't simple when you're part of this world, because Marcus has connections to my family's business, and walking away would mean destroying relationships my father spent 40 years building, because I signed contracts, made commitments, and breaking those would trigger lawsuits and scandal and destroy everything my family worked for. She looked up at him, her eyes wet. Because I was scared. Am scared. Marcus doesn't lose well. He lost 2 nights ago. Only because you were there. If you hadn't stood up, if you'd been like everyone else and looked away. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Lucas leaned back in the booth, processing everything she'd told him. His life had always been simple. Not easy, but simple. Work hard. Take care of your family. Do right by your neighbors. The world Elena described was something else entirely. A maze of obligations and expectations and power dynamics he couldn't begin to navigate. So what happens now, Ink? He asked. Now I'm trying to figure out who I am without all of this. Elena gestured vaguely, encompassing not just the diner, but her entire life. I'm trying to make choices that are mine, not my father's or Marcus's or anyone else's. And one of those choices is using my money, the money I never asked for but have anyway, to help someone who helped me when he had nothing to gain from it. I'm not a charity case, Elena. I know you're not. But your garage is struggling, Lucas. I can see it. And not because you're bad at what you do. Rosie told me you're the best mechanic in 3 counties. You're struggling because you charge people what they can afford instead of what the work is worth. Because you fix cars for college kids and single mothers and anyone else who needs help, even when they can't pay. You're struggling because you're good. Lucas wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Everything she said was true. He did charge based on what people could afford. He did eat the cost of repairs more often than his accountant liked. And yes, his garage was struggling because of it. Accepting your money doesn't feel right, he said quietly. Then don't think of it as accepting. Think of it as allowing me to invest in something worthwhile. Elena leaned forward, her voice taking on a new intensity. Lucas, I've been thinking about this constantly since that night. About what you did, about who you are, about what it means. And I realized something. For the first time in my life, I have a chance to do something that matters. Not for my father's company, not for Marcus's ego, not for appearances or obligations or family legacy, just something good. What are you talking about? Elena pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the table between them. I'm talking about a partnership, not a handout, not charity. An actual business partnership where we both contribute, both benefit, and both build something meaningful. Lucas opened the folder carefully, as if it might explode. Inside were professional documents, printouts with numbers and projections, photographs of his own garage that someone had clearly taken from the street. The top page was titled Community Automotive Initiative, a Proposal. What is this? He asked. It's an idea I've been working on for the past 2 days. With your permission, I'd like to invest in Reed's Auto Repair. Not buy it, not take it over, but invest in it as a partner. We use that investment to upgrade your equipment, repair the building, maybe hire some help so you're not working 60 hours a week. In exchange, we create a program that provides free or reduced cost automotive repair to families who need it most. Single parents, people on fixed incomes, anyone struggling to keep their car running so they can get to work, take kids to school, live their lives. Lucas stared at her. You want to give away car repairs? I want to create a model that's sustainable. We charge normal rates to customers who can afford it, use that revenue to cover operating costs, and my investment funds the gap for people who can't. We're not giving away services. We're making essential services accessible to everyone, regardless of their economic situation. Lucas flipped through the documents, his head spinning. Elena had thought of everything. Projected costs, community partnerships, outreach strategies, even potential tax benefits and grant opportunities. This wasn't a whim or an emotional reaction. This was a fully developed business plan created by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. You put all this together in 2 days? He asked. I had help. There's a woman I know, Clara Winston, who runs a nonprofit foundation. I called her yesterday, explained what I wanted to do, and she connected me with people who could help put together a proper proposal. Elena's expression was earnest, almost pleading. Lucas, I know this is a lot. I know it's overwhelming, but I need you to understand something. My entire life, I've had access to resources I didn't earn and didn't particularly want. I've attended charity galas where rich people write checks to feel good about themselves, where we all pretend we're making a difference while nothing actually changes. I'm tired of pretending. I want to do something real. Why me? Why this? Because you showed me that good people still exist. Because your garage serves a community that actually needs help, not just wealthy people who want to feel philanthropic. Because, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Because for the first time in my life, I met someone who didn't want anything from me. Do you know how rare that is? How completely, impossibly rare. Lucas set down the folder and looked at her. Really looked at her. Beneath the expensive clothes and practiced composure, he saw someone desperate to matter, to be more than a name on a bank account or a piece in someone else's game. He thought about Sarah, about the advice she used to give him when he was stuck on a decision. She'd always said to trust his gut, to listen to the quiet voice underneath all the noise. And right now that voice was telling him that Elena wasn't trying to trap him or control him or buy his friendship. She was simply trying to be seen, to be useful, to transform her privilege into something meaningful. Can I ask you something honestly? Lucas said. Of course. What happens when you get bored? When the novelty wears off and you realize running a community auto program isn't glamorous or exciting? What happens to all the people who will depend on this if you decide to walk away? Elena didn't flinch from the question. That's fair, and I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or get overwhelmed. But I can promise I'm not doing this for entertainment. I'm doing this because I need purpose, Lucas. I need to matter in a way that has nothing to do with my last name. And if I commit to something, I see it through. Ask my father. I'm stubborn to a fault. Lucas smiled despite himself. I believe that. So is that a yes? He wanted to say yes. Every practical part of him was screaming to say yes, to take this opportunity and transform his struggling garage into something stable and sustainable. But there was still something holding him back, some fundamental discomfort with accepting this kind of help. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Not because I don't appreciate what you're offering, but because this is big, and I need to make sure I'm making the right decision for the right reasons." Elena's face showed disappointment, but she nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The money isn't going anywhere." They sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the diner washing over them, conversations and laughter and the clink of silverware on plates. Normal sounds from a normal Tuesday night in a normal town, except nothing felt normal anymore. "Can I ask you something now?" Elena said. "Sure." "What was she like, your wife?" The question caught Lucas off guard. He'd expected more talk about business, about the proposal, about logistics and timelines. Not this. Sarah was... He stopped, searching for words that could contain her. "She was the best person I've ever known. Kind without being naive. Strong without being hard. She taught elementary school and believed every single kid who walked into her classroom could change the world if given the chance. She made me better just by existing." "How long were you married?" 10 years. We met in high school, got married young because we knew, just knew. Everyone said we were too young, that we'd regret it, but we didn't. Not for a single day." "And when she got sick?" Lucas took a breath. This wasn't a story he told often, but something about Elena made him want to share it. Maybe because she'd been so honest with him. Maybe because they both understood what it meant to lose the person you'd built your life around. "She found a lump," he said. "Went to the doctor thinking it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Breast cancer, aggressive, already stage 3. They gave her 2 years with treatment, maybe 6 months without. She chose treatment because of Mia. Said she'd fight for every single day she could get with our daughter." "She sounds incredible." She was. And the thing is, even dying, even going through chemo and radiation and surgery and all the hell that comes with it, she was still more concerned about everyone else. Worried about me, about Mia, about her students, tried to make everyone comfortable with what was happening. Lucas's throat tightened. "Near the end, when the treatment stopped working, she made me promise something." "What?" "She made me promise I wouldn't stop living, that I wouldn't use her death as an excuse to hide from the world. She said Mia needed to see that life goes on, that grief doesn't have to mean giving up." He wiped his eyes roughly. "I've tried to keep that promise. Some days are easier than others." Elena reached across the table and put her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it carried weight, understanding, shared pain, even if the details were different. "I think you're keeping it," she said quietly. "The fact that you stood up the other night, that you helped a stranger, that you're sitting here considering this partnership instead of just shutting it down. That's living, Lucas. That's not hiding." They stayed like that for a moment, hands touching across the scarred surface of the diner table. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found common ground in loss and hope and the desperate desire to matter. Rosie came by with the coffee pot, saw their hands, and retreated without a word. Lucas smiled despite himself. Tomorrow the whole town would know he'd been holding hands with the mystery woman from the diner. Small towns didn't keep secrets well. "I should go," Elena said finally, though she didn't move. "You need time to think, and I need to figure out my next steps." "Are you safe?" Lucas asked. "Marcus hasn't tried to contact you?" "He's called about 100 times. I haven't answered. My father's lawyers are handling things now, formally ending the relationship, unwinding the business connections, all of it. Marcus will threaten and bluster, but ultimately he's a coward who only feels powerful when he has control. The second I took that control away, he lost his leverage. That doesn't mean he's not dangerous. I know. I'm staying with Clara, the woman I mentioned who runs the foundation. She has security, proper protection. I'm being careful." Elena squeezed his hand once more, then let go. "But thank you for asking. Most people don't." She stood to leave, gathering her folder and her bag. Lucas stood too, because Sarah had raised him to have manners, even when his world was tilting sideways. "Elena," he said as she turned to go. "Yes?" "Thank you. For the proposal, for the honesty, for seeing something in me worth investing in. Even if I don't take the partnership, that means something." She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. "You're worth investing in, Lucas Reed. I hope you see that too." After she left, Lucas sat back down and picked up the folder again. He read through every page carefully, studying the numbers, the projections, the careful thought that had gone into every aspect of the proposal. This wasn't charity. This was genuine partnership, structured in a way that would benefit everyone involved while serving people who genuinely needed help. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. "Mia's asleep on my couch. Take your time. Everything okay?" He texted back, "Everything's fine. Be home soon. Thank you." But as he sat there in Rosie's diner, surrounded by the comfortable familiarity of his hometown and holding a proposal that could change everything, Lucas wasn't sure fine was the right word. Confused, maybe. Overwhelmed, definitely. Hopeful, surprisingly. He thought about what Sarah would say if she were here. She'd probably tell him he was overthinking it, that sometimes opportunities come from unexpected places, and you just have to trust that the universe knows what it's doing. She'd been better at that than him, better at faith and trust and believing things would work out. Lucas gathered up the folder and headed home. Mia was indeed asleep on Mrs. Patterson's couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit like a lifeline. He scooped her up carefully, thanked Mrs. Patterson, and carried his daughter across the yard to their house. As he tucked Mia into bed, she stirred slightly. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby?" "Did your meeting go okay?" "It went fine. Go back to sleep." "Okay," she yawned. "Love you." "Love you too, sweetheart." He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep, thinking about the life he was trying to build for her. He'd promised Sarah he wouldn't stop living, wouldn't use grief as an excuse to hide, but he'd also promised himself he'd protect Mia, keep her safe, make decisions that put her first. This partnership with Elena could give them both stability, security, a future that didn't involve constantly worrying about making ends meet. But it also meant trusting someone new, letting someone into their carefully constructed life, accepting help in a way that felt vulnerable and uncomfortable. Lucas went downstairs and spread the proposal out on his kitchen table. He read it again, this time with a pen, making notes in the margins, circling numbers, writing questions. He worked until after midnight, until his eyes burned and his coffee had gone cold. Finally, he picked up his phone and sent a text. "I have questions. A lot of them. Can we meet again tomorrow?" Elena's response came almost immediately, like she'd been waiting. "Yes, same time, same place. Actually, why don't you come to the garage around noon? I want you to see what you're investing in. Really see it. I'll be there." Lucas set down his phone and looked around his small kitchen. The refrigerator covered in Mia's artwork, the table where they ate breakfast every morning, the window that looked out on the yard where Sarah had planted roses that still bloomed every spring. This was his life. Simple, ordinary, built from love and loss and the daily work of showing up. And maybe, just maybe, it was about to become something more. Elena arrived at Reed's Auto Repair at exactly noon, driving a black sedan that looked expensive but not ostentatious. Lucas watched from inside the garage as she parked carefully in the lot, taking in the cracked pavement and faded parking lines with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than judgment. She stepped out wearing work boots, jeans, and a denim jacket, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She'd dressed for a garage, not a business meeting, and something about that made Lucas relax slightly. "Welcome to the kingdom," he said as she walked through the open bay door. Elena looked around with the careful attention of someone who actually wanted to understand what she was seeing. She studied the lifted cars, the organized tool chests, the wall covered in faded photographs of 3 generations of Reed mechanics. Her gaze lingered on a black and white photo of Lucas's grandfather standing proudly in front of this same building in 1967. "Your grandfather?" she asked. "Yeah, Henry Reed. He opened this place after coming back from Vietnam. Said he'd seen enough destruction and wanted to spend the rest of his life fixing things instead of breaking them." "That's beautiful." "That was Henry. My dad used to say he could fix anything with an engine and most things without one." Lucas gestured around the garage. "He built all this from nothing, just skill, determination, and a reputation for honest work. Passed it to my dad, who passed it to me. 3 generations of Reeds keeping this town's cars running." Elena walked slowly through the space, and Lucas tried to see it through her eyes. The concrete floor was stained with decades of oil, despite his best efforts to keep it clean. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. The walls needed paint. The roof had leaks he patched every spring, and half his equipment was older than he was. But everything worked. Everything was organized, and every tool had its place. This garage might be struggling, but it wasn't failing. Not yet. How many customers do you see in a week? Elena asked. Depends on the week. Maybe 20, 25. More in winter when people need help with their heating systems and dead batteries. Less in summer when everyone's on vacation. And how many of those customers pay full price? Lucas hesitated. This was the heart of his problem, the reason his accountant kept telling him he was running a charity instead of a business. Maybe half. The rest either can't afford full price or they're people I've known my whole life, and I can't bring myself to charge them what the work is actually worth. Like who? He pointed to a faded blue Honda in the corner. That's Mrs. Henderson's car. She's 83, lives on Social Security, and that car is the only way she can get to her doctor's appointments. She needs new tires and a brake job, probably $1,500 worth of work. I'll charge her $300 and she'll try to pay me in casseroles. And you'll accept the casseroles. She makes a really good tuna casserole. Lucas smiled despite himself. But yeah, I'll accept them. Because what's the alternative? Tell an 83-year-old woman she can't have transportation because she doesn't have money? That's not how I was raised. Elena nodded slowly, understanding. Show me the rest. Lucas gave her the full tour. He showed her the ancient diagnostic computer that crashed twice a day, the lift that needed replacement parts he couldn't afford, the compressor that leaked air and cost him money every time he ran it. He showed her the roof leak in the back corner where he kept buckets positioned to catch the drips. He showed her everything, holding nothing back, letting her see exactly how close to the edge he was operating. But he also showed her the good parts, the wall of thank you cards from customers whose cars he'd saved, whose lives he'd made easier, the donation box where people left whatever they could afford when they couldn't pay cash, the coffee can full of I owe us from people who promised to pay him back someday, and mostly did, the community bulletin board covered in job postings, garage sale announcements, and requests for help that had nothing to do with cars, but everything to do with neighbors taking care of neighbors. This is more than a garage, Elena said quietly. This is a community center. I guess it is. Never thought about it that way, but yeah. People come here when they need help, even if it's not car help. Tommy Zhao, that college kid I mentioned, he's been sleeping in his Honda for the past 2 weeks because his apartment flooded and he can't afford a new place. I let him park here at night, use the bathroom to clean up, keep his stuff in the back office. Is that running a business? Probably not, but it's the right thing to do. Where is he now? Class. He's studying engineering at the community college. Smart kid, works 3 jobs, sends money home to his parents. He'll make something of himself if the world gives him half a chance. Elena walked over to a beat-up pickup truck that occupied the second bay. And this one? That belongs to Carl Simmons. He's a contractor, runs a small crew doing home repairs. Truck threw a rod last week, needs a complete engine rebuild. I quoted him $4,000, which is barely covering my costs. He's paying me in installments, $200 a month. At that rate, he'll finish paying me off in about 2 years, assuming nothing else breaks. Will anything else break? Probably. It's a 2001 Chevy with 200,000 miles, but Carl's got a family to feed and jobs depending on that truck, so I'll fix whatever breaks and we'll figure out the money later. Elena pulled out a small notebook and started writing. Lucas watched her work, impressed by the focus and attention she brought to everything. This wasn't a rich person slumming it for entertainment. This was someone genuinely trying to understand the problems she wanted to solve. How much do you pay yourself? She asked without looking up. Enough to cover rent, food, Mia's expenses, not much more than that. Actual number, Lucas. He told her. She stopped writing and looked at him like he'd just said something in a foreign language. That's below minimum wage if you factor in your actual hours worked. I'm aware. You could make more working literally anywhere else. But then who would fix Mrs. Henderson's car? Who would help Tommy? Who would make sure Carl can keep working? Lucas leaned against his workbench. Money's important, Elena. I get that. But it's not the only thing that's important. My grandfather used to say that a man's worth isn't measured by his bank account, but by how many people would show up to help if his house was on fire. By that metric, I'm doing all right. Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man. He was. Stubborn as hell, but wise. Lucas paused. You still want to invest in this? Now that you've seen how bad it really is? Bad? Elena looked around the garage again, and when she turned back to him, her expression was intense. Lucas, this isn't bad. This is exactly what I was hoping to find. You're not running a business in the traditional sense, you're running a lifeline. And you're drowning because you're trying to save everyone while nobody's saving you. I don't need saving. Everyone needs saving sometimes. You taught me that, remember? Sometimes the right thing to do is accept help when it's offered. She had him there. Lucas had spent the last 3 years being the strong one, the provider, the person everyone else leaned on. The thought of reversing that dynamic, of being the one who needed support, felt wrong on a fundamental level. But he was tired. God, he was so tired. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to admit that. I have conditions, he said. Elena's face lit up. I'm listening. First, this stays a family business. My name stays on the building, my decisions still matter, and when Mia's old enough, she gets the option to take over if she wants it. I'm not selling out my family's legacy. Agreed. I don't want to take over, Lucas. I want to support what you're already doing. Second, we help the people who actually need help, not just whoever looks good on paper for publicity. No photo ops, no press releases about how generous we are. The work speaks for itself, or it doesn't speak at all. Agreed. Third, if you ever want out, you give me enough notice to find alternative funding or scale back the community programs responsibly. We don't build something people depend on and then yank it away because you got bored or the foundation decided to shift priorities. Elena's expression grew serious. Lucas, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this through my father's foundation or cross industries. This is my money, my project, my commitment. The only person who can end this partnership is me, and I'm not going anywhere. How can you be sure? Because for the first time in my adult life, I'm making a choice that's entirely mine. Not my father's choice, not Marcus's choice, not what's expected or convenient or politically advantageous. Mine. She met his eyes. I need this to work just as much as you do, maybe more. Lucas studied her, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. He found none. Whatever had brought Elena to his garage, whatever combination of desperation and hope and need to matter had led her here, it was real. She believed in this. In him. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. Elena's smile could have powered the entire town. Really? Really, but I want everything in writing, proper contracts, legal protections for both of us, clear roles and responsibilities. We're going to do this right. I already have lawyers drafting the paperwork. We can have everything ready to sign by the end of the week. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling Clara right now. She's going to be so excited. Lucas held up a hand. Wait, before you make calls and this becomes official, I need to ask you something. Elena lowered her phone. What? What happens with Marcus? You said your father's lawyers are handling things, but handling and finished aren't the same thing. If we're partners, if you're going to be involved in my business and my life, I need to know what kind of trouble might be following you. It was a fair question, and Elena knew it. She put her phone away and sat down on an overturned bucket, suddenly looking exhausted. Marcus is furious, she said quietly. He's calling me constantly, leaving voicemails that start out apologetic and end up threatening. He's contacted my father, tried to convince him that I'm having some kind of breakdown and need to come home. He's told mutual friends that I'm unstable, that the incident at the diner never happened the way people are saying it did, that I'm making things up for attention. Classic abuser playbook, Lucas said. Isolate, discredit, maintain control. Exactly. But here's what he doesn't know. Before I left, I documented everything. Photos of bruises, recordings of arguments, copies of emails and texts showing the pattern of control and abuse. I gave all of it to my lawyers with instructions that if Marcus tries anything, legal action, harassment, public smear campaign, they release everything, every last piece of evidence showing exactly who he is and what he's done. That's smart. That's survival. Marcus built his entire identity on being the charming, successful businessman everyone admires. The threat of that image being destroyed is the only thing he understands. Elena's hands were shaking slightly. But it's also a gamble, because if I use that evidence, it doesn't just hurt him, it exposes me too, makes my entire private life public, turns my pain into entertainment for people who don't know me and don't care about anything except the scandal. Lucas understood. She'd built her own prison with those recordings and photos, created a deterrent that only worked if she was willing to destroy herself in the process of using it. Has he made any direct threats against you? Lucas asked. Not explicitly. He's too smart for that. But the implication is there. In the tone, the word choices, the way he keeps saying, I'm making a mistake and I'm going to regret this. She looked up at Lucas. I'm being careful. I don't go anywhere alone. I've changed all my passwords and access codes, and Clara's security team knows the situation. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Being scared isn't weakness. It's your brain telling you to be careful, which is exactly what you're doing. Lucas grabbed another bucket and sat down across from her. But here's what I need you to know. If we do this partnership, if we build this thing together, you're not just investing in my garage. You're joining a community, and this community looks after its own. What does that mean? It means if Marcus shows up here causing problems, he's not dealing with you alone. He's dealing with me, with Rosie, with Big Mike and Mrs. Patterson, and every person in this town who knows that when someone needs help, you help them. Small towns aren't perfect, but we're pretty good at circling the wagons when someone threatens one of ours. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just understand that you're not alone anymore. That's part of the deal. She nodded, wiping her eyes quickly. They sat there for a moment in the comfortable quiet of the garage, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the distant sounds of traffic on Main Street. Two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found themselves building something together. The moment was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the lot. Lucas looked out to see a familiar silver Lexus, and his stomach immediately tightened. That was John Cross's car, Elena's father. Did you tell your father you were coming here? Lucas asked. Elena followed his gaze and went pale. No, I haven't told him anything about this yet. I wanted to make sure it was real before I had that conversation. The Lexus parked, and a man in his early 60s emerged. John Cross was exactly what Lucas had expected. Tall, distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Lucas's truck, moving with the confident authority of someone who'd spent his entire life making decisions that moved millions of dollars and affected thousands of lives. He surveyed the garage with an expression that was difficult to read, then his eyes found Elena. We need to talk, John said. Not hello, not how are you, just the immediate demand for attention that came with being a man used to getting his way. Elena stood, and Lucas could see her physically transforming. Her shoulders straightened, her expression became carefully neutral, and when she spoke, her voice had lost all its warmth. Father, what are you doing here? Looking for my daughter, who's apparently been hiding out in small towns and ignoring my calls. John's gaze shifted to Lucas. And you must be the mechanic, Lucas Reed. It wasn't a question. John Cross had clearly done his homework, probably knew everything about Lucas down to his credit score and the last time he'd gotten a parking ticket. That's me, Lucas said, standing as well. He didn't offer his hand. Something told him John wasn't here for pleasantries. I'd like to speak with my daughter privately, if you don't mind. Actually, I do mind, Elena said before Lucas could respond. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Lucas. We're business partners. John's eyebrows rose. Business partners? Is that what we're calling this? That's what it is. I'm investing in Reed's Auto Repair, and we're developing a community automotive program together. It's legitimate, legal, and none of your concern. Everything you do is my concern, Elena. You're still the heir to Cross Industries, still family, still carrying our name. Your decisions reflect on all of us. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to arrange my life like a corporate merger. Elena's voice was sharp now, cutting. Before you pushed me into a relationship with a man who turned out to be abusive because it was good for business. John's expression flickered. Was that guilt? Regret? Lucas couldn't tell. Marcus wasn't supposed to be abusive. He was supposed to be a partner, someone who could help you lead the company when I stepped down. How was I supposed to know he would— You could have asked me, Elena interrupted. You could have listened when I tried to tell you I wasn't happy. You could have treated me like a daughter instead of an asset to be managed and deployed strategically. The garage had gone completely silent except for the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Lucas felt like he was watching something intensely private, something he had no right to witness. But Elena had said to stay, so he stayed. John took a breath, visibly controlling himself. I'm not here to argue about the past. I'm here because you disappeared without warning, moved in with strangers, and now you're apparently investing significant amounts of money into ventures I know nothing about. As your father and as the head of Cross Industries, I have a right to understand what's happening. As my father, yes. As the head of Cross Industries, no. This money isn't company money, Father, it's mine. The trust fund grandfather left me that I've never touched, that has nothing to do with Cross Industries or your control. I'm finally using it for something meaningful. Meaningful. John looked around the garage again, and this time Lucas could read his expression clearly. Disdain, dismissal. The kind of judgment that came from someone who'd never had to worry about making rent or fixing a roof leak. You're throwing away your inheritance on a failing garage in a dying town because some mechanic was nice to you once? Elena, I taught you better than this. That was enough. Lucas had stayed quiet out of respect for Elena's family dynamics, but he wasn't going to stand there and be insulted in his own garage. With respect, Mr. Cross, you don't know anything about this business or this town. We're not failing. We're providing essential services to people who need them, and we're doing it with integrity. If that doesn't fit your definition of success, that's your limitation, not ours. John turned his full attention to Lucas for the first time, and Lucas understood immediately why this man had built an empire. The force of his personality was almost physical, a weight that made you want to step back, apologize, defer. Lucas didn't step back. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Reed, John said quietly. I've eaten alive men with more experience and resources than you'll ever have. If you think you can use my daughter's emotional vulnerability to access her money— I'm not using anyone, Lucas said, his voice steady. Your daughter came to me. She offered this partnership. And the only reason I'm accepting is because I believe we can do genuine good for people who need it. If you can't see that, if all you see is someone trying to take advantage, then maybe you should look at why your daughter would rather invest in strangers than trust her own family. The silence that followed was dangerous. Lucas could feel Elena's tension, could see John's hands clenching into fists. This could go very wrong very quickly. But then Elena stepped between them, facing her father, with her chin raised and her voice clear. Lucas is right. I did come to him. I offered this partnership because I needed something real, something that mattered, something that had nothing to do with corporate strategy or family expectations. And if you can't support that, if you're just here to try to control me like always, then you can leave. John stared at his daughter, and for a moment Lucas saw something crack in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or recognition, the understanding that he'd pushed too hard and driven her away. I'm trying to protect you, John said, and for the first time he sounded like a father instead of a CEO. Marcus has been spreading rumors, Elena, saying you're unstable, that you need help, that this whole thing is a cry for attention. He's poisoning relationships we spent decades building. And now you're here investing in some garage with a man you barely know, and I'm supposed to just trust that this isn't another impulsive decision you'll regret? It's not impulsive. It's the most carefully considered decision I've made in years. Elena's voice softened slightly. Dad, I know you're worried. I know this looks strange from the outside, but for once in my life I need you to trust me. Trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust that I'm capable of making my own choices. Even if those choices put you in danger? Especially then, because staying safe by staying silent, by accepting abuse, by living a life someone else designed for me, that's not safety. That's just a different kind of danger. Father and daughter looked at each other across the garage, and Lucas could feel the weight of their entire relationship in that moment. All the expectations, the disappointments, the love that had gotten tangled up in business and control, and the crushing pressure of legacy. Finally, John sighed. I can't stop you. The money is legally yours, the decision is legally yours, and you're an adult who can do what she wants. But I'm asking you, as your father, to be careful. Get proper legal counsel. Make sure everything is documented and protected. And if this man, he gestured at Lucas without looking at him, gives you any reason to doubt his intentions, walk away. Promise me that. I promise, Elena said. But Dad, you need to understand something. Lucas didn't ask for my money. He didn't want it. I had to convince him to accept this partnership because he's spent his entire life helping people without expecting anything in return. He's one of the good ones. The kind of person you taught me to recognize and value. John finally looked at Lucas again, really looked at him this time. Lucas met his gaze steadily, with nothing to hide and nothing to prove. If you hurt my daughter, John said quietly, there isn't a corner of this world where you'll be safe. I have no intention of hurting anyone, Lucas replied. But I appreciate you caring enough to threaten me. Shows you love her, even if you don't always show it well. It was a bold thing to say, maybe too bold, but Lucas had learned from Sarah that sometimes the truth needed to be spoken even when it was uncomfortable. John's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe respect, maybe anger. It was hard to tell. I need to get back to the office, John said finally. He turned to Elena. We're having dinner Sunday. Your mother misses you. Be there. I'll think about it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now. John looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Elena's expression stopped him. He nodded once, stiff and formal, then walked back to his Lexus without another word. They watched him drive away, and only when his car had disappeared around the corner did Elena release the breath she'd been holding. I'm sorry, she said. I should have warned you that might happen. How did he even find you? He probably had someone tracking my phone, or my credit cards. Or maybe Clara told him. They've known each other for years. Elena rubbed her temples. He means well. He just doesn't know how to love people without trying to control them. That's not an excuse. I know, but it's an explanation. She looked at Lucas. Are you having second thoughts? I wouldn't blame you. My family's complicated and messy, and apparently shows up uninvited to make things difficult. Lucas thought about it, really considered whether the complexity Elena brought with her was worth the potential benefit of their partnership. Then he thought about the look on her face when she talked about needing something real, something that mattered. He thought about his promise to Sarah to keep living, to not hide from the world. He thought about Mia and Mrs. Henderson and Tommy Zhao and all the people who needed someone to stand up and say that kindness still mattered. No second thoughts, he said. Complicated families I can handle. But we need to set some ground rules about boundaries and communication so this doesn't blow up in our faces. Elena smiled, and relief washed over her features. I can work with ground rules. They spent the next hour going over details, asking hard questions, planning for contingencies. Elena showed Lucas preliminary contracts her lawyers had drafted. Lucas pointed out clauses that needed changing, terms that needed clarifying. They negotiated like equals, both bringing different strengths to the table, both committed to making this work. By the time Elena left, they had the framework of a real partnership. Not just a handshake and good intentions, but an actual business structure that protected both of them and served the community they were trying to help. Lucas watched her drive away, then looked around his garage with new eyes. In a week, maybe two, this place would start transforming. New equipment, proper repairs, the resources to help people without wondering if he could afford to keep the lights on. It was everything he needed, but had been too proud to ask for. His phone buzzed, a text from Mia, who was at after-school art class. Made you something. You're gonna love it. Lucas smiled and texted back a heart emoji. Then he got back to work because Mrs. Henderson's Buick wasn't going to fix itself, and some things were more important than worrying about what came next. The future could wait. Right now, he had work to do. 3 weeks later, Reed's Auto Repair looked like a different place entirely. The cracked pavement had been resurfaced. The faded sign replaced with one that read, Reed's Auto Repair and Community Garage, in clean, professional lettering. Inside, new diagnostic equipment hummed quietly in the corner. The leaky roof had been sealed, and the ancient lift had been replaced with a modern hydraulic system that didn't make ominous grinding noises every time Lucas raised a vehicle. But the biggest change wasn't visible in the equipment or the building. It was in the people. Lucas had hired 2 mechanics to help with the workload, both recommended by customers who knew their stuff. James Rivera was a retired Navy mechanic in his 50s who'd been looking for part-time work to supplement his pension. Maria Chen was fresh out of technical school, Mr. Chen's granddaughter, hungry to prove herself in a field that didn't always welcome women. Together, the 3 of them had transformed the garage from a one-man operation, constantly on the edge of collapse, into something that actually functioned like a real business. Lucas stood in the doorway of his office, watching Maria walk an elderly customer through the repairs her car needed, explaining everything in clear, patient language that didn't talk down or try to upsell. James was under a Ford Explorer, whistling some tune from the 70s, completely at peace with his work. And in the waiting area that Elena had insisted they create, comfortable chairs and a coffee maker had replaced the old folding chairs and vending machine that never worked. It was everything Lucas had wanted but never believed he could have, and it terrified him. "You're doing it again," Elena said from behind him. Lucas turned to find her standing in the office doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee from Rosie's diner. She'd been coming by the garage almost every day, sometimes to check on the progress, sometimes just to help out. Today she wore jeans and a Reed's Auto t-shirt they'd had made for the staff, her hair in a messy bun, and she looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Doing what?" he asked, accepting the coffee. "Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Looking for the catch, the problem, the thing that's going to prove this is all too good to be true." She sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Lucas, it's been 3 weeks. Everything's going exactly according to plan. You're allowed to relax and enjoy it." "I know, it's just—" He searched for the right words. "I spent so long barely holding on that I don't know how to function without that constant pressure. Does that make sense?" Perfect sense. I felt the same way after I left Marcus, like I kept waiting for him to show up, to take back the freedom I'd claimed. It took Clara about a month to convince me that safety wasn't temporary. Elena sipped her coffee. "Speaking of which, we need to talk about the community program launch." Lucas sat down behind his desk, which was now actually organized thanks to Elena's ruthless filing system. "What about it?" "We're ready. The application process is set up, we've got funding allocated for the first 6 months, and Clara's foundation has agreed to help with outreach to make sure people who need the program actually know about it. We could launch next week if you want." Next week. Lucas felt his chest tighten. The community program was the heart of everything they were building, the whole reason Elena had invested in the first place. It would provide free or heavily reduced automotive repair to single parents, seniors on fixed incomes, people struggling to keep their cars running so they could get to work, take kids to school, maintain the basic mobility that modern life required. It was beautiful in theory. In practice, it meant opening himself up to a flood of need he wasn't sure he could meet. "What if we can't help everyone?" Lucas asked quietly. "What if we get more applications than we can handle and have to turn people away? What if we build hope and then break it because we promised more than we could deliver?" Elena leaned forward, her expression serious. "Then we help who we can, and we're honest about our limitations. Lucas, we're not trying to solve poverty or fix every problem in this town. We're trying to make one specific thing, automotive repair, more accessible to people who need it. That's achievable. That's real." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's doable. And we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be better than what existed before, which was nothing." She pulled out her phone and showed him something. "Clara helped me draft this mission statement. Tell me what you think." Lucas read the words on her screen. The Reed's Community Garage program exists to provide essential automotive services to individuals and families for whom transportation is a necessity, but repair costs are a barrier. We believe that access to reliable transportation is not a luxury, but a fundamental requirement for economic stability and personal dignity. Our goal is not charity, but equity. Not handouts, but helping hands. He read it twice, feeling emotion catch in his throat. "Who wrote this?" "Clara drafted it, but the core idea came from something you said that first night at the diner. When you told me that sometimes people just need help, and when they do, we help them. That it's not about being a hero, just about being present." Elena smiled. "You've been living this mission your whole life, Lucas. We're just making it official." Before Lucas could respond, Maria appeared in the doorway. "Boss, Mrs. Henderson's here for her car. and she brought enough tuna casserole to feed the entire block. Lucas laughed despite himself. Tell her I'll be right there. He found Mrs. Henderson in the waiting area, holding a covered casserole dish and beaming at him with the kind of joy that came from simple things going right. Her Buick was parked outside, the new tires gleaming, brakes working perfectly, and he'd even given it a wash because it seemed like the thing to do. Mr. Reed, I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice wavering with emotion. I know what this work should have cost. I know what you charged me was basically nothing. It was something, Lucas said gently, and you're paying me in casserole, which is honestly the best deal I've gotten all week. I'm serious, young man. Without this car, I can't get to my doctor's appointments, can't visit my sister in the nursing home, can't live my life. She set down the casserole and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You gave me my independence back. That's worth more than money. Lucas felt his throat tighten. This was why he did what he did. Not for profit or recognition, but for moments like this. For the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd made someone's life a little bit easier. You're very welcome, Mrs. Henderson. Drive safe. After she left, Lucas turned to find Elena watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. Nothing. Just watching you be exactly who you are. It's refreshing. She glanced at her watch. I need to head out, meeting with Clara about the foundation work. But think about what I said about the program launch. We're ready when you are. Elena had been gone for maybe 20 minutes when James emerged from under a Honda Civic, wiping his hands on a rag and shaking his head. Lucas, you need to see this. Lucas followed him to the Civic, which belonged to Tommy Zhao. The college kid had brought it in for what he thought was a simple oil leak, but James's expression suggested it was considerably more serious. Transmission's shot, James said, pointing to the undercarriage. She's been leaking fluid for months, running dry, grinding herself to death. Needs a full rebuild or replacement. Lucas felt his stomach drop. How much? Parts and labor? $2,500 minimum, maybe $3,000 if we run into complications. James looked at him sympathetically. I know the kid can't afford that. Lucas knew it too. Tommy was barely keeping his head above water as it was, working 3 jobs and sleeping in his car. A $3,000 repair bill would destroy him, force him to drop out of school, maybe lose everything he'd been working toward. Let me talk to him, Lucas said. Tommy came by after his evening shift at the grocery store, still wearing his uniform, his face gray with exhaustion. Lucas met him outside, not wanting to have this conversation where others could hear. How bad is it? Tommy asked, and Lucas could hear the fear underneath the question. Transmission needs to be rebuilt. It's not a quick fix, Tommy. We're looking at significant cost. How significant? Lucas told him. He watched the number hit Tommy like a physical blow, saw his shoulders slump, saw hope drain out of his eyes. I don't have that kind of money, Tommy said quietly. I've got maybe $800 in savings, and that's supposed to be for next semester's textbooks. Without the car, I can't get to my jobs. Without my jobs, I can't pay for school. Without school. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Lucas had seen this spiral before. One unexpected expense, one piece of bad luck, and entire lives came crashing down. The system was designed to punish people for being poor, to make escape nearly impossible. But maybe, for once, they could break that pattern. What if I told you there might be another option, Lucas said. What option? We're starting a community program. It's not officially launched yet, but the infrastructure is there. We help people who need automotive repair but can't afford it. People exactly like you. Tommy's eyes widened. You mean like charity? I mean like community support. You apply, we review your situation, and if you qualify, we cover all or most of the cost. You pay what you can afford, when you can afford it, and we handle the rest. Why would you do that? Lucas thought about how to answer. He could talk about equity and access and mission statements, but that wasn't really the truth. The truth was simpler and more complicated at the same time. Because someone helped me once, Lucas said. When my wife was sick, when I was drowning, people showed up. They brought food, watched my daughter, helped keep my business running when I couldn't focus on anything except Sarah. They saved me, and now I have the chance to do the same for someone else. So that's what I'm doing. Tommy was crying now, tears running down his face without sound. I don't know what to say. Say you'll fill out the application. Say you'll let us help. Say you'll pass it forward someday when you're in a position to help someone else. I will. I swear I will. Lucas put a hand on Tommy's shoulder. Then we'll get your transmission fixed. You focus on your classes and your jobs, and let us worry about the rest. After Tommy left, Lucas went back inside to find Maria and James had been watching through the office window. Neither said anything, but Maria was wiping her eyes and James was nodding with approval. We're launching the program, Lucas said. Next week, like Elena suggested, and Tommy's our first participant. About damn time, James said. I was wondering how long you'd wait before actually using all these resources we've got now. That night, Lucas picked up Mia from Mrs. Patterson's house to find his daughter covered in paint and absolutely buzzing with excitement. Dad, guess what we made in art class? What did you make? A community mural. Everyone in class painted a picture of someone who helps our town, and mine was you. She pulled out a piece of paper showing a stick figure version of Lucas standing next to a car. The stick figure was smiling, and above it Mia had written, "My dad fixes things." Lucas felt emotion flood through him. This is beautiful, sweetheart. Mrs. Patterson says you're a hero because you help people. Are you a hero, Dad? He thought about that question as he buckled her into the truck. Was he a hero? He didn't feel like one. He just felt like a guy trying to do right by his community, trying to honor the memory of his wife, trying to build a life that his daughter could be proud of. I think, he said carefully, that heroes are just regular people who choose to help when they see someone who needs it. By that definition, yeah, maybe I am. But so are a lot of other people. Mrs. Patterson, Rosie, your teachers, the crossing guard who makes sure you get to school safely. We're all heroes in our own small ways. Mia thought about that. Then I want to be a hero too. You already are, baby. You already are. The following week passed in a blur of activity. Elena worked with Clara to get the word out about the community program through schools, churches, community centers, and local social service agencies. They created a simple application that asked about income, family situation, and transportation needs without being invasive or demeaning. They established clear criteria for who qualified and how much assistance they could provide. Applications started arriving almost immediately. A single mother who needed her minivan fixed so she could take her kids to medical appointments. An elderly veteran whose truck was the only way he could get to the VA hospital. A newly divorced woman trying to rebuild her life who needed reliable transportation to get to her new job. Person after person, story after story, all connected by the common thread of needing help and having nowhere else to turn. Lucas sat in his office reviewing applications with Elena, and the weight of responsibility felt crushing. We can't help all of them, he said, looking at the stack of papers. Not immediately. We don't have enough capacity. So we prioritize, Elena said calmly. Most urgent needs first. Medical necessity, job security, child safety. We help who we can now and create a waiting list for the rest. It's not perfect, but it's honest. They worked through the applications together, making decisions that felt impossible. Choosing between a man who needed his truck for work and a woman who needed her car for chemotherapy appointments. Between a family struggling with multiple kids and a senior living alone. Each choice felt like they were letting someone down. But Elena was right. Imperfect help was still help, and the alternative was helping no one. By the end of the week, they'd selected 5 participants for the program's initial launch. Tommy Zhao with his transmission, Maria Santos, the single mother with the minivan, Robert Williams, the veteran with the truck, Jennifer Park, the divorced woman starting over, and Grace Morrison, a hospice nurse whose car had died and who needed it to visit dying patients in their homes. 5 people, 5 lives they could make easier. It wasn't everyone, but it was a start. The launch event was Elena's idea. Nothing fancy, just an open house at the garage where they could introduce the program to the community, show people what they were building, and make it clear that help was available for those who needed it. Rosie provided coffee and sandwiches. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies. Big Mike hung a banner reading Community Garage Program across the front of the building. And people came. Not hundreds, but enough. Neighbors and customers, town council members and local business owners. People curious about what was happening. People who'd heard about the program and wanted to support it. people who might need it themselves someday and wanted to know it existed. Lucas stood near the entrance, shaking hands and answering questions, watching his garage fill with community in a way it never had before. This wasn't just about car repair anymore. This was about connection, about people taking care of each other, about building something that mattered. He spotted Mia running around with Mrs. Patterson's grandson, the two of them playing hide-and-seek between the parked cars. He saw James explaining the new diagnostic equipment to a group of high school students interested in automotive careers. He saw Maria showing a woman how to check her own oil, empowering her with knowledge instead of just fixing her problem. And he saw Elena. She stood in the corner talking to Clara, the two of them laughing about something, and Lucas realized with a start that Elena looked happy. Not the careful, practiced smile she'd worn when he first met her, but genuine joy. The kind that came from doing work that mattered, from being valued for who you were instead of what you could provide. She caught him looking and walked over, leaving Clara to chat with the town mayor. "This is amazing," she said. "Look at what we built." "You built it," Lucas corrected. "I just provided the location. We built it together. That's the whole point." She looked around the crowded garage. "You know what the best part is? None of these people are here because of my name or my money or my family connections. They're here because they believe in what we're doing, because they see the value in taking care of each other. That's a small town for you. We look after our own." "I'm starting to understand that." Elena smiled. "And I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm one of your own now." Before Lucas could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. The crowd was parting, people stepping back, and Lucas felt his stomach drop as he saw why. Marcus had arrived. He stood in the doorway wearing an expensive suit and an expression of barely controlled rage. His eyes scanned the garage until they found Elena, and the look he gave her was pure venom. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the pleasant chatter like a knife. "Now." The garage went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to watch this confrontation unfold. Lucas saw Elena go pale, saw her hands start to shake, saw the fear flash across her face before she controlled it. Then he saw her straighten her spine, lift her chin, and walk toward Marcus with her head held high. "There's nothing to talk about," Elena said, her voice clear and strong. "We're done, Marcus. I've made that very clear." "You've made yourself look like a fool," Marcus shot back. "Running away, hiding in this pathetic little town, playing charity case with a mechanic who's clearly taking advantage of you. Your father warned me you were having some kind of breakdown, but I didn't want to believe it." Lucas started moving toward them, but Elena held up a hand, stopping him. This was her fight. He needed to let her have it. "I'm not having a breakdown," Elena said. "I'm having a breakthrough. I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. And what I see is a man who tried to control me, abuse me, and make me smaller so he could feel bigger. That's over now. You have no power here." Marcus took a step forward, his face flushing. "You think you can just walk away from me? From everything we built together? I made you, Elena. Without me, you're nothing." "Without you," Elena said quietly, "I'm free." That's when Lucas saw Marcus's hand move. It was subtle, just a slight shift, but Lucas had seen enough bar fights and domestic situations to recognize the precursor to violence. Marcus was about to grab her, to make a physical claim of dominance and control. Lucas moved fast, putting himself between Elena and Marcus before the other man could make contact. He didn't touch Marcus, didn't threaten him, just stood there as an immovable barrier. "You need to leave," Lucas said calmly. "Now." Marcus looked at him with pure hatred. "This doesn't concern you, mechanic. It concerns me when someone threatens my business partner in my garage. You've said your piece. Elena's said hers. Conversation's over. Time to go." "And if I don't?" Lucas gestured around the garage at the 50-plus people watching this confrontation, at Big Mike standing by the door with his arms crossed, at James and Maria flanking them like silent guardians. "Then you'll have to explain to all these witnesses why you refused to leave private property after being asked. And given that half the people here have phones out and are recording this, I imagine that explanation will be very public and very permanent." It was a bluff, mostly. Lucas hadn't actually seen anyone recording, but Marcus's eyes flickered around the room and found exactly what Lucas had suggested he'd find. Phones out, cameras pointed, evidence being collected. Marcus's face went from red to purple. This isn't over, Elena. You're making a huge mistake. Both of you are. The only mistake I made, Elena said from behind Lucas, was wasting 3 years on you. Now get out. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might push it further, but the cold reality of public scrutiny won out over his rage. He turned and stalked out of the garage, slamming into his car and peeling out of the parking lot with enough speed to leave rubber on the fresh pavement. The moment he was gone, Elena's knees buckled. Lucas caught her before she fell, supporting her weight as the adrenaline and fear caught up with her all at once. "You're okay," he said quietly. "You're safe. He's gone." "I can't believe he actually came here," Elena gasped. "I thought he'd given up. I thought it was over." "Men like that don't give up easily, but you handled it perfectly. You stood your ground. You didn't let him intimidate you, and you had a whole community backing you up." Elena looked around at the faces watching them with concern and support. Rosie had appeared with a glass of water. Mrs. Patterson was already on her phone, probably calling the sheriff's department to report the incident. Clara had moved to the entrance, blocking it like she was prepared to physically fight anyone else who tried to cause trouble. "I'm sorry," Elena said to the room at large. "I didn't mean to bring this here. Didn't mean to ruin the event." "You didn't ruin anything," Rosie called out. "That man made his own choices. You just showed him the door. That's not ruining anything. That's standing up for yourself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. People returned to their conversations, giving Elena space to recover while making it clear through their continued presence that they weren't going anywhere. The event continued, transformed now from a simple program launch into something deeper. A statement that this community protected its own, that violence and intimidation had no place here, that they stood together. Lucas helped Elena to his office, where she could sit down and breathe without everyone watching. Clara followed, closing the door behind them to give them privacy. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, kneeling beside Elena's chair. "I think so, just shaken. I knew he was angry, but I didn't think he'd actually show up here and make a scene." Elena looked at Lucas. "I'm so sorry. This is exactly what you were worried about. Me bringing trouble to your door." "Stop," Lucas said firmly. "This isn't your fault. Marcus is responsible for his own actions. And honestly, I'm glad he showed up." "Why?" "Because now everyone knows. Now there's no ambiguity, no private abuse that people can dismiss or explain away. He showed his true colors in front of 50 witnesses, and that's power, Elena. That's evidence. That's protection." Clara nodded. "Lucas is right. I saw at least a dozen people recording. By tomorrow, everyone in this town will know exactly who Marcus is and what he tried to do. That's social consequences. That's accountability." Elena took a shaky breath. "I was so scared. When I saw him, all I could think about was all the times he'd cornered me, all the times I'd had to just take it because there was no one around to help." "But this time there was," Lucas said. "This time you weren't alone. And you never will be again." They sat in the quiet of the office for a few minutes, letting the adrenaline fade, letting the reality of what had happened settle. Outside, the event continued, the community showing through their presence that they wouldn't be deterred by one angry man's attempt at intimidation. Finally, Elena stood up. "I should get back out there. Show everyone I'm okay. Show Marcus, if he's watching, that he didn't win." "Are you sure?" Clara asked. "We can end the event early if you need to." "No. We end early. He wins. We hide. He wins. We let fear change our plans. He wins." Elena straightened her shirt, wiped her eyes, and lifted her chin. "I'm done letting him win." She walked back out into the garage with Lucas and Clara flanking her like honor guards. The moment people saw her, a spontaneous round of applause broke out. Not loud or showy, just a quiet acknowledgement of courage, of strength, of community standing together. Elena smiled, and this time the tears in her eyes weren't from fear, but from gratitude. The event wrapped up an hour later with 5 families officially enrolled in the community program and a dozen more applications submitted for the next round. Lucas stood at the entrance watching people leave, accepting handshakes and thanks, feeling the weight of what they'd built settling comfortably on his shoulders. Mia ran up to him, still full of energy despite the long evening. "Dad, that man was mean to Elena, but you protected her. like a real hero. Lucas picked her up, even though she was getting too big for it. We all protected her, sweetheart. That's what community means. We take care of each other. Will she be okay? Yeah, baby. She's going to be just fine. As the last of the guests left and the garage finally grew quiet, Lucas found Elena sitting on the hood of a car, looking exhausted but at peace. Long day, he said, sitting beside her. Long month, she corrected. But a good one. The best one I've had in years, actually. Even with Marcus showing up? Especially with Marcus showing up, because he showed me something important. She looked at Lucas. I used to think being strong meant not needing anyone, being completely self-sufficient and independent. But that's not strength. That's just isolation. Real strength is building connections, trusting people, letting them see you at your worst and knowing they won't leave. That's what you taught me. I didn't teach you anything. You knew it all along. You just needed permission to believe it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Two people who'd found themselves building something neither had expected but both desperately needed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Applications to review, repairs to schedule, probably more fallout from Marcus's very public meltdown. But tonight, sitting in a garage that smelled like motor oil and hope, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. And that was enough. The weeks following Marcus's public confrontation brought changes Lucas hadn't anticipated. The incident had spread through town like wildfire, but not in the destructive way he'd feared. Instead, it galvanized the community. People who'd been on the fence about the garage program suddenly showed up with donations. Local businesses offered partnerships. The town council reached out about expanding the initiative to include other essential services. Lucas sat in his office on a cold November morning, reviewing the numbers with a sense of disbelief that refused to fade. In 2 months, they'd helped 17 families, 17 cars back on the road, 17 people who could get to work, take kids to school, visit doctors, live their lives without the constant fear of their vehicle breaking down and taking their whole world with it. Maria knocked on the doorframe. Boss, Elena's here, and she brought someone with her. Lucas looked up to see Elena walking through the garage with a woman he recognized immediately. Tall, elegant, wearing a wool coat that probably cost more than his truck, with Elena's eyes and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. This was Elena's mother, Catherine Cross. Mrs. Cross, Lucas said, standing quickly and wiping his hands on his jeans even though they were already clean. This is unexpected. Mr. Reed. Catherine's handshake was firm, her eyes sharp and assessing. My daughter has told me a great deal about you and what you're building here. I wanted to see it for myself. Elena looked nervous, which told Lucas this visit hadn't been her idea. Mom wanted to come by before she heads back to the city. I told her we were busy, but she insisted. I always insist when it comes to understanding my daughter's choices, Catherine said, but there was warmth beneath the formality. May I look around? Of course, though I should warn you, we're not much to look at compared to what you're probably used to. Catherine's smile was slight but genuine. Mr. Reed, I grew up in a town smaller than this one. My father owned a hardware store. I know what real work looks like, and I know the difference between flash and substance. Show me substance. So Lucas did. He showed her the garage, introduced her to James and Maria, explained the community program and how it worked. He showed her the application files, the waiting list, the careful documentation they kept to ensure everything was transparent and accountable. He showed her Mrs. Henderson's thank you card pinned to the bulletin board, and Tommy Zhao's acceptance letter to a 4-year university program that he'd been able to accept because his car was running and he could afford to continue working. Catherine listened without interrupting, asked intelligent questions, and looked at everything with the same careful attention she'd probably use to evaluate business deals worth millions. When the tour was complete, she turned to Lucas with an expression he couldn't quite read. My husband came here a few weeks ago, she said. He told me you were either a con artist or a fool. Possibly both. Lucas felt his stomach tighten, but he met her gaze steadily. And what do you think? I think you're neither. I think you're a man who understands that wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the difference you make. And I think my daughter is very fortunate to have found someone who sees her value beyond her bank account. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I also think, Catherine continued, that this program has potential far beyond this single garage. Have you considered expanding it? Lucas blinked, caught off guard. Expanding how? Other towns, other communities. Create a model that can be replicated, supported by a foundation structure that provides funding and framework while letting local mechanics maintain autonomy and control. Scale the impact without losing the personal touch that makes this work. That would require significant resources, Lucas said carefully. An infrastructure we don't have. But I do. Catherine pulled a card from her purse and handed it to Lucas. This is my personal attorney. Not Cross Industries, not my husband's lawyers. Mine. I'd like to discuss funding a pilot expansion program. 3 additional garages in communities similar to this one, each run by mechanics who share your values and commitment to service. We keep what works about your model and learn from what doesn't. Lucas looked at Elena, who seemed just as surprised as he was. Did you know about this? Not until this morning, Elena said. Mom called and said she wanted to visit, but I thought it was just to check on me. I had no idea she was planning this. I wasn't planning it, Catherine admitted. I came here expecting to convince my daughter she was making a mistake, wasting her inheritance on charity that wouldn't last. But what I see is a sustainable business model that happens to do good while doing well. That's not charity, Mr. Reed. That's smart economics with a conscience. And I've spent 40 years learning to recognize the difference. Lucas sat down slowly, his mind racing. Expanding the program meant helping more people, creating more jobs, building something that could outlast him and Elena both. But it also meant growth, complexity, the risk of losing the personal connection that made this garage special in the first place. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course. Though I should tell you that either way, I'm creating a foundation to support this kind of work. The only question is whether you want to be involved in shaping it or not. Catherine glanced at her watch. I need to head back to the city. Elena, are you coming? Elena looked at her mother, then at Lucas, then back to her mother. Actually, I think I'm staying here, at least for a while. There's still a lot of work to do. Something passed between mother and daughter, an understanding that didn't require words. Catherine nodded slowly. Then I'll see you at Thanksgiving. Your father's already planning a menu that could feed half the state. I'll be there. And Mom? Elena stepped forward and hugged her mother tightly. Thank you for coming here with an open mind. Thank you for showing me I raised a daughter with better sense than her father gives her credit for. Catherine released her and turned to Lucas. Take care of my girl, Mr. Reed. She's tougher than she looks, but everyone needs someone in their corner. She's got a whole town in her corner now, Lucas said. But yeah, I'll look out for her. After Catherine left, Elena collapsed into the chair across from Lucas's desk. I can't believe my mother just offered to fund a multi-garage expansion program. 6 months ago, she was telling me I needed to marry Marcus for the good of the family business. What changed? I think seeing Marcus show up here and make a scene finally convinced her that my father's judgment isn't infallible. And seeing what we've built, seeing the actual impact on real people instead of just numbers on a spreadsheet, that changed her perspective. Elena smiled. Plus, my mother has always had a soft spot for businesses that make money while making a difference. She just never saw a model that actually worked until now. This doesn't work without you, Lucas said quietly. You know that, right? The money helps, but what really makes this succeed is you being here, caring about the people, putting in the time and effort to make sure we're doing it right. If we expand, that means more time, more commitment. Is that something you really want? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the office window at the garage floor where Maria was explaining brake systems to a customer. 6 months ago, I was trapped in a relationship that was slowly killing who I was. I had money but no purpose, status but no meaning. I felt invisible even when everyone was looking at me. She turned back to Lucas. Now I wake up every morning with something to do that matters. I have work that makes a difference. I have people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide them. So yes, Lucas, this is exactly what I want. Even knowing it means staying in this small town, no glamour, no excitement, just the daily grind of helping people keep their cars running, especially because of that. Do you know what I've learned in the past 2 months? That glamour is exhausting and excitement is overrated. What I want is purpose. What I want is to matter in a real, tangible way. What I want is this. She gestured around the garage. All of this. Before Lucas could respond, James appeared in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically worried. Lucas, we've got a situation. Jennifer Park's car just got towed in, and it's bad. Jennifer was one of their program participants, the recently divorced woman who'd been rebuilding her life after leaving an abusive marriage. Her car had been running fine last week when they'd done routine maintenance. Lucas followed James out to the garage floor with a growing sense of dread. The car sat in the bay, and even from a distance Lucas could see the problem. The hood had been pried open, and inside was deliberate destruction. Cut wires, smashed components, sugar poured into the oil reservoir. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was sabotage. Her ex-husband? Lucas asked quietly. James nodded grimly. That'd be my guess. Jennifer's inside the waiting room. She's pretty shaken up. Lucas found Jennifer sitting in one of the chairs Elena had picked out, holding a cup of coffee with shaking hands. She looked up when he entered, and the fear in her eyes was all too familiar. He'd seen that same look on Elena's face the night they met. I'm sorry, Jennifer said immediately. I know this is going to cost money I don't have, and the program's not supposed to cover vandalism, and I'm probably going to lose my job because I can't get to work, and... Stop, Lucas said gently, sitting down beside her. Just breathe for a second. Tell me what happened. Jennifer took a shaky breath. I parked outside my apartment last night like always. This morning I go out and the car won't start. I call a tow, they bring it here, and the driver tells me it looks like someone messed with it on purpose. And I know it was Derek, my ex. He's been calling, leaving messages saying I'll regret leaving him, that I won't make it on my own. This is him showing me he can still control my life even if I'm not with him anymore. Lucas felt anger rise in his chest, hot and righteous. Men like Derek and Marcus, men who couldn't stand losing control, who'd rather destroy someone than let them be free. It was the same pattern, the same poison, just different names and faces. Did you call the police? He asked. What's the point? Unless I can prove it was him, they can't do anything. And even if I could prove it, what happens? He gets a slap on the wrist and I still don't have a working car. I still can't get to my job. I still lose everything I've been working for. Elena had entered quietly and was standing by the door, listening. When she spoke, her voice was firm and clear. That's not going to happen. We fix the car, you keep your job, and you don't pay a dime. But the program rules say we help people who need it. You need it. That's the only rule that matters. Elena looked at Lucas. Right? Lucas stood and walked back to the garage floor, examining the damage more carefully. It was extensive but not irreparable. New wiring harness, replacement sensors, flushed the oil system completely. Probably a few hundred in parts and several hours of labor. Expensive but manageable. He thought about the expansion Catherine had proposed, about scaling this program to help more people. But what good was scale if they couldn't help the people right in front of them? What good was a perfect business model if it meant turning away someone in crisis? Maria, he called out, clear your schedule. We're prioritizing this repair. Maria appeared, took one look at the damage, and nodded. How fast do you need it done? She needs to be at work tomorrow morning. Can we make that happen? If we both work on it, yeah. Might need to stay late, though. Then we stay late. Lucas turned to Jennifer. You'll have your car back tomorrow, and we're going to document every bit of this damage. Take photos, write up a detailed report. You might not be able to prove Derek did this, but you'll have evidence of what was done. That matters for insurance, for restraining orders, for building a case if you decide to pursue one. Jennifer's tears were flowing freely now. I don't understand why you're doing this, why you're all being so kind to me. Elena sat down beside her and took her hand. Because someone was kind to me when I needed it most. Because we've all been where you are in one way or another. Because in a world full of people trying to tear each other down, we choose to build each other up. It's that simple and that complicated. Lucas spent the rest of the day working on Jennifer's car with Maria, their hands moving with practiced efficiency through the tedious work of undoing deliberate destruction. As they worked, Maria told him about her own story. about an abusive boyfriend in college who tried to convince her she was worthless, that she'd never amount to anything. She'd gotten out, finished her degree, and built a career in a field that told her women didn't belong. Every car she fixed, every customer she helped, was proof that he'd been wrong. "This is why the program matters," Maria said, splicing a new wire into place. "It's not just about cars. It's about giving people the tools they need to build the lives they deserve. Transportation is freedom. Without it, you're trapped. With it, you can go anywhere, be anyone, escape anything." By 8 o'clock that night, they'd repaired most of the damage. Lucas sent Maria home and continued working alone, finding a strange peace in the mechanical precision of the work. There was something satisfying about taking chaos and turning it back into order, about fixing what had been deliberately broken. He was finishing the last connections when Elena appeared with coffee and sandwiches from Rosie's. "Thought you might need fuel," she said, setting the food on his workbench. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. I wanted to." She watched him work for a moment. "This reminds me of that first night at the diner. You stepping in when no one else would, refusing to look away from someone who needed help. That was different. That was immediate danger." "Is it, though? Derek destroying Jennifer's car, Marcus throwing coffee mugs. It's all the same violence, just different methods of control." Elena leaned against the workbench. "I've been thinking about what my mother said, about expansion, about scaling this program, and I think we should do it." Lucas paused, wrench in hand. "Really? Really? Because there are Jennifer Parks everywhere. There are single mothers and struggling students and elderly people who need help but have nowhere to turn. If we can create a model that works, if we can replicate this in other communities, we could help thousands of people instead of dozens." "That's a lot of responsibility." "It is, but I think we're ready for it, and I think we owe it to everyone who supported us to try." She smiled. "Besides, you told me once that your grandfather said a man's worth is measured by how many people would show up if his house was on fire. Imagine how many lives we could touch if we really tried." Lucas set down his wrench and looked at her. In the fluorescent light of the garage, wearing jeans and one of his old work shirts she'd borrowed, with grease on her hands and determination in her eyes, Elena looked nothing like the frightened woman he'd met in a diner 2 months ago. She looked strong. She looked certain. She looked free. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it. But we do it right. We find the right people, build the right structures, maintain the values that make this work. We don't sacrifice quality for quantity." "Agreed. We start small, learn as we go, and only expand when we're sure we can do it without losing what makes this special." They shook on it there in the garage, sealing a partnership that had started with a stranger's kindness and grown into something neither could have anticipated. Lucas finished the repairs around midnight and drove home to find Mia asleep on the couch, Mrs. Patterson snoring gently in the armchair beside her. He woke Mrs. Patterson gently, thanked her profusely, and carried Mia upstairs to bed. As he tucked her in, she stirred. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby?" "Are you fixing the world?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Mrs. Patterson said you're helping lots of people now, that you're making things better. Is that fixing the world?" Lucas thought about how to answer. The world was big and broken in ways he couldn't begin to address. Wars and poverty and injustice that existed on scales he'd never touch. But in this small corner, in this one town, with these specific people, maybe he was making a difference. Maybe that was enough. "I'm fixing my corner of it," he said finally. "That's all anyone can really do. Find your corner and make it better." "Then I want to fix my corner too when I grow up." "You already are, sweetheart. Every day you're kind to someone, every time you help a friend, every time you choose to build instead of break, you're fixing your corner." He kissed her forehead. "Now sleep. Tomorrow's a school day." The next morning, Lucas was at the garage before dawn to finish the final checks on Jennifer's car. Everything worked perfectly. The destruction had been completely undone, transformed back into reliable transportation that would get Jennifer to work, to job interviews, to the life she was building away from the man who'd tried to control her. Jennifer arrived at 7, expecting bad news, and burst into tears when Lucas handed her the keys. "It's done. Really done? Really done. Oil changed, all systems tested, even gave it a wash. You're good to go. How much do I owe you? Nothing. The program covers this. Jennifer shook her head. That can't be right. The damage was so extensive, this has to have cost thousands. 1,500 in parts, 8 hours of labor. But like Elena said yesterday, you needed help. We helped. That's what we do. Lucas paused. Though I do need something from you. Jennifer's face fell. What? I need you to promise that when you're in a position to help someone else, you will. That's the only payment I want. Pass it forward. Build someone else up the way we're building you up. Deal? Deal, Jennifer whispered. I promise. She drove away with tears still streaming down her face, and Lucas watched her go with the satisfaction that came from knowing he'd helped someone reclaim their freedom. The weeks before Thanksgiving brought a steady rhythm to the garage. More applications, more repairs, more lives quietly transformed by the simple act of accessible automotive care. The waiting list grew, but so did their capacity. James trained a young apprentice from the high school. Maria developed a partnership with the community college to offer hands-on training for students interested in automotive careers. Elena worked with Clara's foundation to create replicable frameworks for other communities. Tommy Zhao stopped by one afternoon, no longer the exhausted kid sleeping in his car, but a confident young man who'd just aced his engineering midterms. He brought Lucas a gift, a small metal sculpture he'd made in his welding class, 2 hands clasped together. For helping me when I needed it most, Tommy said. I'm going to graduate, Mr. Reed. I'm going to get my degree, get a good job, and someday I'm going to run a program just like this for other students who need help. That's my promise to you. Lucas put the sculpture on his desk where he could see it every day, a reminder of why the work mattered. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Elena came by the garage with news. Her mother's foundation had identified 3 communities similar to theirs, each with a mechanic who shared Lucas's values and commitment to service. The expansion pilot program was ready to launch. They want to meet you, Elena said. Get your input on how to structure things, learn from what we've built here. Would you be willing to travel after the holiday just for a few days? Lucas thought about leaving the garage, about trusting James and Maria to handle things in his absence. 6 months ago, the thought would have terrified him. Now it felt like the natural next step. Yeah, he said. I can do that, but I want you to come with me. This is your program as much as mine. Our program, Elena corrected. It's ours. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. Lucas woke early and started preparing the meal he'd been planning for weeks. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, pumpkin pie. Enough food for a small army because he'd invited everyone. Elena and Clara, James and his wife, Maria and her girlfriend, Mrs. Henderson, Tommy, Jennifer, Big Mike, Rosie, Mrs. Patterson, and her grandson. His small house would be packed, chaotic, loud. It would be perfect. Elena arrived first, carrying her mother's famous sweet potato casserole and looking nervous. I've never done this before. Thanksgiving with friends instead of family. Is that weird? Friends or family you choose, Lucas said, making space for her dish on the crowded counter. Sarah used to say that all the time. The people who show up, who care, who stick around when things get hard, those are your real family, regardless of blood. I like that. Elena looked around his kitchen, at the refrigerator covered in Mia's artwork, at the photos of Sarah on the mantle, at the comfortable chaos of a home actually lived in. I like this life we're building. The doorbell rang, and soon the house filled with exactly the kind of chaos Lucas had hoped for. Mia ran around with Mrs. Patterson's grandson, showing off her room and her toys with the generosity unique to children who felt secure in their world. James and Big Mike argued good-naturedly about football in the living room. Maria and Jennifer bonded over shared experiences with terrible ex-boyfriends. Rosie and Mrs. Henderson traded recipes while keeping a sharp eye on the turkey. Lucas stood in the doorway between his kitchen and living room, watching it all unfold, feeling something expand in his chest that he hadn't felt since before Sarah died. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Elena found him there, handed him a beer, and stood beside him watching their chosen family celebrate together. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For standing up that night in the diner. for seeing me when I felt invisible, for building something with me that gave my life meaning when I didn't think meaning was possible anymore. She turned to look at him. You saved my life, Lucas. Maybe not in the dramatic, obvious way, but in the way that really matters. You showed me that I was worth saving. Lucas felt his throat tighten. You saved mine too. I was drowning in grief and responsibility, trying to hold everything together while falling apart. You gave me permission to accept help, to build something bigger than just survival. We saved each other. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching their friends and chosen family fill his home with warmth and laughter and the kind of love that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. When dinner was ready, they all crowded around Lucas's dining room table, which had been extended with folding tables and card tables to accommodate everyone. Lucas looked around at the faces, old friends and new ones, people he'd known his whole life and people he'd just met, all connected by the simple thread of showing up for each other when it mattered. I'm not good at speeches, he said, standing with his glass raised, but I want to say something. A year ago, I was alone, not physically. I had Mia in this town, but emotionally, I was isolated in my grief, convinced that accepting help was weakness, that I had to handle everything myself. Then Elena walked into my life, and through her, all of you walked in too. You've taught me that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about building connections, accepting help, and paying it forward to the next person who needs it. He looked at Elena, who was wiping her eyes. You've taught me that sometimes the right thing to do is say yes when someone offers kindness. That communities work because people choose to show up for each other, not because they have to, but because they want to. That family isn't just blood, but the people who stay, who care, who fight for you even when it's hard. He raised his glass higher. So thank you, all of you, for showing up, for caring, for making this corner of the world a little bit better just by being in it. That's what I'm grateful for this year. Not things or money or success, but people. You people. This family we've built together. The toast was met with murmured agreement, clinking glasses, and more than a few tears. They ate until they couldn't move, told stories, laughed until their sides hurt, and built memories that would carry them through whatever came next. After dinner, while everyone was scattered around the house in various states of food coma, Elena found Lucas in the kitchen doing dishes. Need help? She asked. Always. They worked in companionable silence for a while, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying. Finally, Elena spoke. I talked to my father yesterday, told him about the expansion program, about staying here long term, about building a life that has nothing to do with cross industries. How'd he take it? Better than I expected. He said as long as I'm happy and safe, that's what matters. I think Marcus showing his true colors publicly finally convinced my father that maybe his judgment isn't infallible, that maybe I'm capable of making my own decisions. She set down the dish she'd been drying. He also said he wants to meet you properly, not as the mechanic dating his daughter, but as my business partner, as someone important in my life. Lucas paused, his hands in the soapy water. We're not dating. I know, but we could be. If you wanted. If you were ready. Elena's voice was careful, uncertain in a way he'd never heard from her before. I'm not trying to replace Sarah, Lucas. I could never replace her, and I wouldn't want to, but I care about you, and I think maybe you care about me too, in a way that's more than just business partnership. Lucas thought about that as he finished washing the last plate. Did he have feelings for Elena? Yes, if he was honest with himself. But feelings were complicated when you were a widower with a daughter, when you were still processing grief, when you were building something important that could be jeopardized by romantic complications. I do care about you, he said slowly, turning to face her. But I don't know if I'm ready for more than friendship right now. Mia's still adjusting to life without her mother. The garage is in a critical growth phase, and honestly, I'm scared. Scared of messing this up, scared of hurting you, scared of losing something important by trying to make it into something else. Elena nodded, and though there was disappointment in her eyes, there was also understanding. That's fair. And honestly, I'm probably not ready either. I'm still learning who I am outside of my father's expectations and Marcus's control. Maybe we both need time to figure ourselves out before we try to figure out an us. But that doesn't mean never, Lucas said. Just not yet. Not yet, Elena agreed. But someday, maybe. If we're both ready. If it still makes sense. Deal. They finished the dishes together, and when they returned to the living room, they found Mia had convinced everyone to play charades. The rest of the evening passed in laughter and terrible acting, and the kind of joy that came from being surrounded by people who genuinely cared about each other. As guests started leaving, each one thanked Lucas for the meal, for the hospitality, for creating a space where they felt valued and welcome. Mrs. Henderson pressed a container of leftover pie into his hands. Tommy gave him another firm handshake and a promise to visit over winter break. Jennifer hugged him tightly and whispered thank you one more time. Finally, it was just Lucas, Mia, and Elena cleaning up the last of the mess. Best Thanksgiving ever, Mia announced, carrying plates to the kitchen with the careful focus of a child trying to help. Yeah? Lucas asked. Better than the year we went to Disney World? Way better. Because everyone we love was here. Lucas met Elena's eyes over Mia's head, and something passed between them. Agreement. Understanding. The recognition that they'd built something precious here, something worth protecting and nurturing regardless of what romantic relationship might or might not develop between them. After Mia went to bed, Lucas walked Elena to her car. The night was cold and clear, stars visible above the streetlights, the kind of night that made everything feel possible. Thank you for today, Elena said, for including me in your family, for making me feel like I belong somewhere. You do belong. Here, with us, building this thing we're creating. That's not going to change regardless of anything else. Promise? Promise. Elena drove away, and Lucas stood in his driveway for a long moment, looking up at the stars and thinking about the strange path that had brought him here. A chance encounter in a diner, a decision to stand up when others might have looked away, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, a community that had rallied around strangers and made them family. 6 months ago, he'd been drowning. Now he was thriving, not because everything was perfect, but because he'd learned to accept help, to build connections, to understand that strength came from community rather than isolation. The months that followed brought steady growth. The expansion program launched successfully, with 3 new community garages opening in towns across the state. Lucas and Elena traveled to each one, trained the mechanics, helped set up systems, shared what they'd learned. Catherine's foundation provided funding and oversight, but the individual garages maintained autonomy and local character. It worked because they'd built it on a foundation of genuine care rather than corporate efficiency. Back home, the original Reed's Community Garage continued to thrive. They'd helped 43 families by spring, with a waiting list that never seemed to shrink but never became unmanageable either. James took over more of the day-to-day operations, freeing Lucas to focus on the expansion program and strategic planning. Maria got promoted to head mechanic, the first woman in that role in the garage's 70-year history. Tommy Zhao graduated with honors and got accepted to a graduate program in mechanical engineering with a full scholarship. Jennifer Park got promoted at her job and started dating a kind man who treated her with respect and dignity. Mrs. Henderson celebrated her 84th birthday with a party at the garage surrounded by people who loved her. And Elena. Elena bloomed like a flower that had been waiting for the right conditions. She cut ties with Marcus completely, helped her father find a successor for Cross Industries who wasn't her, and built a life based on her own choices and values. She got her own apartment in town, a small place above the bakery on Main Street. She joined the town council, started a book club with Rosie and Mrs. Patterson, became a fixture at Mia's school events and soccer games. She and Lucas remained partners and friends, building something important together while giving each other space to grow as individuals. Some nights they had dinner together, just talking about the business or life, or nothing in particular. Some weeks they barely saw each other outside of work. It was comfortable, uncomplicated, exactly what they both needed. On a warm evening in late May, almost a year after that night in the diner, Lucas sat on his porch watching Mia play in the yard. Elena's car pulled up, and she got out carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that suggested good news. "We did it," she said, sitting beside him on the porch steps. "The foundation board approved funding for 5 more garages. We're going regional, Lucas. By this time next year, we'll have helped over 200 families. Lucas accepted the wine and took a drink straight from the bottle because fancy glasses seemed wrong for this moment. 200 families, that's amazing. That's world-changing. That's proof that your grandfather was right. Worth is measured by impact, not by dollars. Elena took the bottle and had a drink herself. We're making a real difference, Lucas. We are. And it's because you had the courage to leave a bad situation, the wisdom to see potential in a struggling garage, and the determination to build something meaningful. This is your success as much as mine. It's ours, Elena corrected, the same way she always did. None of this works without both of us. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Mia chase fireflies in the fading light, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling into evening. Dogs barking, distant laughter, the ice cream truck making its final rounds before dark. The ordinary magic of small-town life. Are you happy? Lucas asked. Elena thought about it. Yeah, for the first time in my adult life, I'm genuinely happy. Not pretending, not performing, just happy. Are you? Lucas considered the question. Was he happy? He still missed Sarah every single day. He still had moments where grief hit him like a wave and pulled him under. But he also had Mia, healthy and thriving. He had work that mattered, a community that supported him, friends who cared about him. He had purpose and meaning and the satisfaction of knowing he was living the promise he'd made to Sarah, to keep living, to not hide, to build a life worth having. Yeah, he said. I am. They sat there until full dark, talking about plans and dreams and the future they were building together. And when Elena finally left, when Lucas went inside to tuck Mia into bed and clean up the day's dishes, he felt something he hadn't felt since before Sarah got sick. He felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect or all his problems were solved, but because he'd learned the most important lesson life had to teach, that we're not meant to face the world alone, that strength comes from community, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept help when it's offered and pass it forward when you can. Lucas Reed had started as just a mechanic in a small town, trying to keep his head above water and his daughter safe. Now he was building something that would outlast him, helping people he'd never meet, creating ripples that would spread far beyond his small corner of the world. He thought about that first night in the diner, about the choice to stand up instead of look away. Such a small decision, really. Such an ordinary act of decency. But from it had grown something extraordinary. A partnership, a program, a community of people committed to taking care of each other. As Lucas turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed, he passed the photo of Sarah on the mantel. He paused there like he did every night, touching the frame gently. I kept my promise, he whispered. I'm still living. I'm still building. I'm still here. And though she couldn't answer, though she existed only in memory and photographs now, Lucas felt her approval, felt her pride, felt her love surrounding him like a warm blanket on a cold night. He'd survived loss and rebuilt his life into something meaningful. He'd accepted help when he needed it and given it freely to others. He'd learned that heroism wasn't about grand gestures, but about small choices repeated daily. The choice to show up, to care, to help when you see someone struggling. He'd learned that family was what you built, not just what you were born into. That community was a verb, not a noun, something you did, not something you had. That kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed small and insufficient in the face of massive problems. And he'd learned that sometimes the right thing to do was simply be present when someone needed you, to stand up when others looked away, to offer help without expecting anything in return, to build instead of break, to connect instead of isolate, to choose love over fear every single day. Lucas Reed wasn't a hero. He was just a mechanic in a small town who'd made one good choice and then kept making them day after day until those choices added up to a life worth living and work worth doing. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.